I guess, unfortunate in the way that the recommendations have come through. The deletion of urban design standards in business zones, the B really clarifies that the panel and staff are recommending that we still retain those in the form of policies and matters of discretion for a resource consent application. Okay. Similarly with L, which is the internal standards around how your internal living arrangements should be designed, things like access to outdoor living space and so on, that is covered in policies and matters of discretion, not prescriptive rules.
Councillor Chris, do you want to move these?
No, I don't. I'd actually like to move the opposite, Mr. Chair. Your pattern is to move them as recommended, and so you're treating a recommendation as a motion, which it's not. And I'm picking up on what Councillor Casey looked at before. There was no motion moved, it was a recommendation. You can negate a recommendation by the first motion, if you follow what I mean.
Yeah, I'm aware of that.
But I mean, look, I'm not challenging the pattern. You're gonna take the recommendation as the first motion.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll move it.
So,
I moved.
and if this fails, I will move
An alternate.
the rejection of the recommendation.
Yeah.
The critical reason, the panel gave no reasons, and it's highlighted there. No specific reasons were given. So how can we as a body, and we've just canvassed the quality of city centre living within 35 metres. This is another area we've dealt with, well, we're yet to deal with design statements and sustainable design. This is another area where we're eroding the quality of built outcomes. And I'm quite concerned how flippant and light we are in approaching this, because the panel has not actually given reasons. It's failed to give reasons.
Stop. Thus far, the discussion has been a discussion that has been held in good humour, but that hasn't, in my experience in the last day and a half, compromised all the quality of the debate. It's not been flippant, and I don't accept that comment. I think it's really important that we continue to hold our sense of good humour, but at the same time bat our end. And so I want you to continue your contribution, but let's just not characterise the way this has gone on, which is with good humour and reasonable pace, but certainly not flippant, but carried out in a very, very serious way in dealing with what might have been slightly less serious, would have been just to accept this whole thing whole as bolus. And so we are most definitely taking the long road home here. So, Councillor Chris, would you like to carry on, please?
Yes, I would. Look, I take these matters around design of our city seriously. And there are no reasons given by the IHP. So my question to the staff is, given there were no reasons, how did we, the staff, arrive at an opposite position?
John.
So it's really important.
Just wait. Okay, you get a chance to think about your answer to this question. You're going to take it serious.
Yeah, the officer report recommends, states that the panel does not provide specific reasons for those specific controls, but the report has made a statement for this particular topic that the panel feels that the controls as a whole, the rules, the standards are overly prescriptive. Yeah. Now, from an officer point of view, we feel that the replacement policies and assessment matters provide sufficient scope to have that discussion with an applicant around design matters and achieve an equivalent outcome, a good urban design outcome. By moving away from prescriptive standards, nothing is necessarily lost as long as those matters are still in the plan and can still be considered in a discussion with an applicant. Okay,
so to follow on and to give us confidence that we're not compromised, because design is going to be an issue that will run all the way through this because we call it a quality compact city. Give us some idea of the types of criteria that you will be reflecting on to ensure quality design in granting of those consents.
Well, Mr Mayor, we probably have to get into the specific wording, and we do have a presentation that we're intending to present later on design statements, and in that there are some quotes from the business provisions that the panel has recommended to us that specifically talk about these design matters. So it's, I guess, convenient in the one sense we do have a presentation ready to go for a subsequent topic on residential, and it does include specific policies and assessment matters from the panel that talk about these matters.
Okay, now, I'm just thinking, so if I can just have a little bit of a second here. So we've got two matters that will relate to that design. Peacefully sit with those. Just give me a few minutes. This is what I suggest we do, and we lose nothing from this. The officers, following on from our 2 requests yesterday, will be giving us a presentation on the issue of design standards. And one of the things that we could do is just hold these 2 pending the outcome of that presentation. We lose nothing. Yep. And, you know, we just keep, I mean, there's any number of other things we can turn our mind to. So why don't we do that? Yep. And therefore, at the end of that, we can vote on the whole lot. How about that? All right. So that is items K and L. Okay. Move on to M. M.
Okay.
Newmarket.
M is a recommendation from the panel that the height control for Newmarket has increased significantly from 32.5 metres to 72.5. The 72.5 is the standard height control for the other metropolitan centres, with some variation in a number of them, but by and large the metropolitan centre height limit is 72.5. Newmarket was 32.5, and the primary reason for that is that there is a volcanic view shaft that goes across the Newmarket area. The panel was conscious of that. And consistent with the panel's view that there shouldn't be a duplication of controls, which is in the overview report from the panel, and I think we've presented on that previously, the panel has recommended that the view shaft control is the key one to ensure that any buildings breaching the view shaft are properly assessed. It would be a non-complying resource consent to breach the view shaft. The view shaft generally goes across Newmarket at around about the 30 to 35 metre height, or about the 35 metre height, and so the panel's view, and officers are supporting this, is to allow the Newmarket height limit to be at the 72.5, and for a particular breach of the view shaft that would be thoroughly assessed as a non-complying resource consent.
Mover. Councillor Linda. Seconder. Councillor Ross.
Question?
Councillor Cam, and then Councillor Mike.
Just on, and it's well detailed on the report as far as the seemingly on the face of it doubling, but I know what you're saying here and what's being achieved. But I think also people need to realise, don't they, John, that it's not just one volcanic view shaft in Newmarket. There is a Newmarket will never be realised in its entirety or near entirety at this height, because there is a myriad of view shafts, Rangitoto, Mount Eden, Mount St John, Mount Hobson, you know, and so there is half the reason why Newmarket hasn't gone up so high is because of the existing view shafts. And so if anyone's scared of this on the face of it, they shouldn't be, because the view shafts will put in effect a control on a lot of the development ever reaching this. Am I right in that assertion?
That's still
Parliamentary question. Is he right?
Much better view from 70.
Well, all we can say is it will be a non-complying resource consent, so it's not prohibited for someone to apply, but it's a pretty high bar that's been set with all of the policies around the view shafts, the importance of the view shafts. They're sitting up there in the regional policy, you know, as regionally significant matters, and it's the non-complying status.
And there's also, sorry John, through you Mr Chair, there's also a reasonably large buffer too along the Newmarket Viaduct, isn't there, the NZTA corridor, that people fearing that that might be swamped by a 72.5 metre building shouldn't fear, because there is a significant threshold there where you can't build too close to that existing viaduct structure.
Yes,
think Penny's got more
you're
detail.
correct. Probably the one area you could get to 72.5 is at the bottom of the old brewery site in Lion Place. That area, it has no view shafts over it, but it's right down the bottom, lower level of Kaiba Pass, and totally surrounded by business activities. That's probably the one area you might get to 72.
No, I certainly support this, Mr Mayor. It's Newmarket is ripe for future high-quality intensification, given the schools, the public spaces, the transport networks, and the employment centre.
University.
And the university.
Yes.
Okay, Councillor Mike?
Yes, I have to disagree with this, Mr Mayor. While the argument is that the control is duplicating the volcanic view shaft controls, that is not really the full picture. The buildings along Broadway are largely character-forming buildings, and this will incentivise their demolition. The other fact, and I think Councillor Brewer referred to it earlier, is that in this very limited space, there are some intensified apartments, certainly not ideal, but more than doubling the height limit will mean the chances are that these, the little sunlight they have coming from the west will be built out. So I think we were right the first time, and we were right earlier today in rejecting the panel's recommendation about minimum sizes on the same arguments. And the argument here holds, same argument here holds. Yes, there is a volcanic view shaft, but that is not the only reason. There are character elements in that Broadway area which are also protected by this height limit. This height limit is for a purpose not necessarily for the volcanic view shaft, and should not be dispensed with. Otherwise you'll be completely changing the character, quite unique historical character of Newmarket as we know it.
Okay, I think that encapsulates
Turn it into a canyon.
Thank you. That
Soulless
encapsulates-
canyon.
Thank you. That encapsulates both ends of the debate. So we move on to item N. If you can give us a brief on that, we'll do O and P and then vote on the lot. Go.
All right, N is a very technical one, just the diagram that they've applied for a height in relation to boundary control in the business zones. Sorry, apologies, that's O. N is a control they've applied within the mixed-use zone, a height in relation to boundary control. Our view is that, and that wasn't part of our case, it's the panel going the opposite direction. They're introducing a height in relation to boundary control. We feel that, as officers, that it's unnecessary to have that control within the mixed-use zone. That's a zone that we want to achieve as much, I guess, capacity as possible, density as possible, still subject to urban design assessment, and a number of urban design standards that the panel has recommended are retained, such as outlook controls from living areas. So we really feel that this height in relation to boundary control is unnecessary. That's N, and O is just a very technical one around a particular diagram for height in relation to boundary in just trying to pick up the zone here, the general business zone, I think it is. It's O. P is quite a different issue, Mr Mayor.
Yep.
So maybe just N and O.
No, do it.
P?
Yes.
Okay. P relates to the Port of Auckland, the port precinct. There were specific provisions that Council put forward at the hearings, supported by the port, that enabled buildings to establish on the Port of Auckland, even in areas that are subject to potentially future coastal inundation during a high tide storm event. In order for the port to operate and function properly, they need to be able to have buildings, obviously, on the Port of Auckland. So the panel, we think it may be unintended, maybe intended, we can't really presume too much, have basically put in a control that would require the port to obtain a resource consent for every building on the port, even fairly small, very functional industrial type structures, so that they can be assessed in terms of coastal inundation hazards based on sea level rise projections and storm events. So we feel that's unnecessary to have that control in place.